The moment I saw Brenda Kellerman taping that fluorescent orange notice to my front door, I knew my peaceful winter in Pine Ridge, Colorado, was about to get complicated. I stepped outside, my coffee still steaming in the frigid morning air. "Morning, Brenda. What's this about?" She turned, her perfectly styled blonde hair not moving an inch despite the wind. Her lips were pursed in that expression I'd come to know too well since moving into Meadowbrook Community 6 months ago. "Good morning, Stephen. The HOA board has voted unanimously to ban all heating equipment from porches and balconies, effective immediately." I pulled the notice off my door and scanned it. "You're serious? It's January. We're getting record lows this week." "Safety concerns," she said, adjusting her puffy North Face jacket. "Patricia Winters reported that someone's propane heater nearly caught their deck furniture on fire. We can't have that liability." I gestured to my porch, where my infrared electric heater sat innocently beside my reading chair. "This is electric. It's designed for outdoor use. There's no open flame." Brenda's smile was the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "The new rule applies to all heating equipment. Electric, propane, wood-burning, fire pits, everything. It's all in the revised community guidelines. You have 48 hours to remove it or face fines. This is ridiculous. People use their porches year-round here." "Then they can dress warmly," she said, her voice taking on that condescending tone that made my jaw clench. "The rules exist for everyone's benefit, Stephen. I suggest you comply." She walked away, her boots clicking on the frozen pathway. I stood there, reading through the notice more carefully. The fines started at $200 and doubled each week of non-compliance. Unlimited. They could theoretically fine me into bankruptcy for wanting to sit on my own porch with a heater. I went back inside and pulled up the HOA bylaws on my laptop. I'd read them when I bought the house, but clearly not carefully enough. There it was, buried in Section 12, Subsection 4. The board had the authority to modify community standards with a simple majority vote. No homeowner input required. My phone rang. It was my neighbor, Marcus Chen, from 2 doors down. "Did you get the notice?" he asked, sounding as irritated as I felt just now. Brenda delivered it personally. "Yeah, she's making the rounds. I've got my fire pit out there. My wife and I use it every weekend. This is insane." "Have you been to any board meetings?" I asked. "Who has time?" "They schedule them at 2 in the afternoon on Tuesdays. I'm at work." That was deliberate, I realized. Brenda was retired, as were most of the board members. Patricia Winters, Donald Richmond, and Sharon Yates, all retirees with nothing but time to micromanage everyone else's lives. "We should fight this," I said. Marcus sighed. "I looked into it when they banned my basketball hoop last summer. The bylaws are airtight. They can pretty much do whatever they want. After we hung up, I spent the next hour researching. Marcus was right. The HOA had broad powers, and fighting them would require either getting elected to the board or gathering enough signatures to call for a special vote. Both options were outlined in the bylaws, but the thresholds were high. I'd need 40% of homeowners to sign a petition. There were 230 homes in Meadowbrook Community. That meant I needed 92 signatures. I decided to start with my immediate neighbors. The weather forecast showed the temperature dropping to -15 degrees by the weekend. Surely people would be upset about losing their outdoor heating options. I was wrong. The first house I tried was the Hendersons, a young couple with twin toddlers. Sarah Henderson answered the door looking exhausted. "I don't really use my porch anyway," she said, bouncing a crying baby on her hip. "Sorry, Stephen. I just don't have the energy to fight the HOA right now." The next 3 houses weren't home. The fifth was old Mr. Peterson, who squinted at me suspiciously. "The HOA knows what they are doing," he said. "I trust Brenda's judgment." By the end of the day, I had exactly 0 signatures. People were either too busy, too scared of retaliation, or genuinely didn't care. That evening, I sat on my porch despite the cold, my electric heater still running, still keeping me comfortable in my insulated chair with a good book. The sun was setting, painting the Rocky Mountains in shades of orange and pink. This was why I'd bought this house. The view, the porch, the ability to enjoy Colorado's natural beauty year-round. I wasn't giving that up without a fight. The next day, I took a different approach. I started researching the heating equipment ban itself. Was it even legal? I called my real estate attorney, Jim Santiago, who'd helped me with the house purchase. "They can regulate what's on your property if it's visible from common areas," he said. "Porches typically fall under that category. Unless the regulation is arbitrary or discriminatory, it'll probably hold up." What if I could prove it's arbitrary? You'd need evidence that they're applying the rule inconsistently or that it serves no legitimate purpose. That's a tough bar to clear. I thanked him and hung up. Then I started watching. I drove through the community that afternoon, taking note of every porch and balcony. Most people had already complied, their heating equipment removed. But as I passed Brenda's house on Willow Creek Drive, I noticed something interesting. She had a heating lamp on her back deck. I could see it clearly from the street, glowing warm and orange. I pulled over and took a photo with my phone. Then I kept driving. 3 streets over, I found Patricia Winters's house. Her porch had a built-in fireplace, and smoke was currently rising from its chimney. Donald Richmond's place had radiant heaters built into his covered patio. I could see them from the sidewalk, clearly operational. The board members had exempted themselves. I spent that evening documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, GPS coordinates. Then I drafted a formal complaint to the board, citing selective enforcement and demanding they either remove their own heating equipment or rescind the ban. I submitted it through the HOA's online portal at midnight. 2 days later, I got my response. It came via certified letter, delivered by a very apologetic postal worker. The letter informed me that built-in heating elements were exempt from the ban, as they were considered permanent fixtures rather than equipment. Additionally, fireplaces were grandfathered in as original home features. It was complete nonsense. My electric heater was no more dangerous than their built-in radiant heaters. Less so, actually, since mine had an automatic shutoff and tip-over protection, but they had an answer for everything. The bylaws gave them that power. I looked at my heater, still sitting on my porch. The deadline had passed. According to their notice, I was now subject to fines. I left it exactly where it was. 3 days later, another letter arrived. A $200 fine for non-compliance. I had 10 days to pay or face additional penalties. I didn't pay it. I also didn't remove my heater. Instead, I did something that, in retrospect, was probably petty but felt absolutely necessary. I started using my porch more than ever. Every morning, I'd wake up at 6, make my coffee, and sit outside with my heater running, wrapped in my warmest coat, reading the news on my tablet. When neighbors walked by, I'd wave cheerfully. Brenda noticed, of course. She drove past my house at least twice a day now, slowing down to glare at my porch. Once, she even stopped and rolled down her window. "You're accumulating fines, Stephen. This is childish." I looked up from my book. "I'm sitting on my porch. That's not against any rules." "The heater is." "Is it plugged in?" I asked innocently. She squinted at it. The truth was, I'd started unplugging it whenever I saw her car coming. I was using it, yes, but I was careful about when. "This is harassment," she said. "I'm sitting on my own porch, Brenda. You're the one who keeps driving by my house." She drove off, her tires squealing slightly on the icy road. The fines kept coming. $400, $800, $1,600. They arrived like clockwork, each one more threatening than the last. I didn't pay any of them. What I did instead was start attending the HOA meetings. They were public, after all, even if they were scheduled to exclude working people. I took vacation days. I rearranged my schedule at the tech company where I worked as a software developer. I showed up to every single meeting. The first one I attended was in the community center, a bland room with fluorescent lights and uncomfortable folding chairs. Brenda sat at the head of a long table, flanked by Patricia, Donald, and Sharon. There were exactly 3 other homeowners in attendance, all retirees who seemed to be there mainly for the free coffee and cookies. When they got to new business, I raised my hand. Brenda sighed. "Yes, Stephen. I'd like to discuss the heating equipment ban. Specifically, the selective enforcement I've documented." I pulled out my folder of photos and evidence. I'd made copies for everyone. These show board members using heating equipment that violates the spirit of the ban, if not the letter. I'm requesting that the board either enforce the rules equally or rescind them. Patricia, a thin woman with sharp features and reading glasses on a chain, barely glanced at my documentation. As we explained in our letter, permanent fixtures are exempt. This was clearly stated. It wasn't clearly stated in the original ban, I countered. The notice said all heating equipment. You added the exemption after I pointed out your non-compliance. "Are you calling us liars?" Donald asked. He was a heavy-set man with a red face that got redder when he was angry. "I'm calling you inconsistent." Sharon, who'd been quiet until now, leaned forward. She was the youngest of the board members, maybe in her late 50s, with graying brown hair. "Mr. Zander, the board makes decisions in the best interest of the community. If you don't like those decisions, you're welcome to run for a board position during the next election cycle." "When is that?" 14 months from now. Of course it was. The meeting continued, but they refused to budge. After it ended, one of the other homeowners approached me, an elderly man named George Walsh. "I appreciate what you're trying to do," he said quietly, "but they'll make your life miserable. Brenda holds grudges. I'm starting to see that. Last year, someone complained about her dog barking. She had them cited for every tiny violation she could find. The couple eventually sold their house and moved. That should have been a warning. I should have backed down. I didn't. Instead, I started documenting everything. Every interaction with the HOA, every letter, every fine. I created a spreadsheet tracking the timeline of events. I photographed my heater daily, showing that it was in perfect condition, posed no safety risk, and was being used responsibly. And then the weather turned. Colorado winters are unpredictable, but that February was brutal. A polar vortex swept down from Canada, bringing temperatures that hadn't been seen in Pine Ridge in decades. -20 at night, -5 during the day. The entire community was frozen solid, and people really wanted to use their porches. I started hearing complaints at the grocery store, the gas station, anywhere neighbors gathered. People missed their fire pits, their heaters, their ability to step outside without immediately retreating indoors. But I was fine. Better than fine, actually. See, I'd been doing some research on the bylaws, and I'd found something interesting. The ban applied to equipment on porches and balconies, spaces that were visible from common areas. But it said nothing about courtyards. My house had a small courtyard, accessible through my kitchen door. It was enclosed by 6-foot privacy fences on all sides, invisible from the street or any common areas. Technically, it wasn't a porch or balcony. I'd moved my electric heater there, along with a comfortable outdoor sofa, a small table, and even some potted plants I'd winterized. I'd strung up some outdoor lights for ambience. It was my own private outdoor paradise, and it was perfectly warm. I started having morning coffee out there, afternoon reading sessions, evening phone calls with friends and family. And because the courtyard was private, there was nothing Brenda could do about it. She tried, though. One morning, I heard my doorbell ring insistently. I was in my courtyard, enjoying the sunrise with a blanket and my heater, drinking hot chocolate and reading a novel. I considered ignoring it, but the ringing didn't stop. Eventually, I went to the door. Brenda stood there with Patricia and a man I didn't recognize. He was younger, maybe in his 30s, wearing a polo shirt with a badge that said Community Compliance Officer. "Steven Zander?" he asked. "That's me. I'm Derek Mills from Safe HOA Enforcement Services. We've received reports that you're violating community heating equipment regulations." I leaned against my door frame. "My heater isn't on my porch. We'd like to inspect your property to verify compliance," Brenda said. "Do you have a warrant?" Derek blinked. "This isn't a criminal matter. According to your HOA bylaws, the board has the right to inspect properties with advance notice for compliance purposes. Did you give me advance notice?" He glanced at Brenda, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "The notice period is 24 hours. We sent an email yesterday." I pulled out my phone and checked. There it was, buried in my spam folder, sent at 11:47 p.m. the previous night. "That's not advance notice. That's a technicality." "Nevertheless," Derek said, pulling out a tablet, "we're authorized to conduct this inspection. We can do it cooperatively, or we can note your obstruction in our report, which will result in additional fines." I could have fought it. I could have called my attorney. But I was curious to see what they'd do, so I stepped aside. "Be my guest." They went straight to my porch, which was completely empty except for my chair and a small side table. No heater in sight. Brenda looked frustrated. "Where is it?" "Where's what?" "Don't play games, Steven. Your heater." "I'm not violating any rules." Patricia narrowed her eyes. "We know you're heating your outdoor space somehow. Multiple neighbors have reported seeing you outside during temperature extremes without appropriate cold weather behavior." "Cold weather behavior? Is that an official term?" Derek was walking around my property now, peering at my courtyard over the fence. It was just barely tall enough to block his view if he stayed on the ground, but I could see him considering his options. "Sir, what's in your courtyard?" "Private property." "Which is still subject to HOA regulations." "Actually," I said, pulling out my own folder of documents, "I've reviewed the bylaws extensively. The heating ban applies specifically to porches, balconies, and common areas. Courtyards enclosed by privacy fencing are classified as private outdoor spaces, subject to different regulations. Unless you can show me where heating equipment is banned in private courtyards, I'm in full compliance." I'd rehearsed this speech. I'd checked with my attorney. I was on solid legal ground. Brenda's face turned an impressive shade of red. "The spirit of the rule is clear. No outdoor heating." "The letter of the rule is also clear, and the letter is what's legally binding." Derek was typing notes on his tablet, his expression neutral. "I'll need to review this with the main office. The courtyard classification may require board clarification." After they left, I returned to my courtyard, my hot chocolate now lukewarm. I reheated it in the microwave and settled back into my comfortable routine. That afternoon, I got a call from Marcus. "Dude, you're my hero," he said, laughing. "Brenda came to my house looking for violations. She's losing it." Did she find anything? 3 inches of unpainted wood on my fence from where I had to replace a board. She's citing me for it. But I don't even care. The look on her face when I told her you found a loophole. Priceless. Word spread fast in a community of 230 homes. By evening, I'd gotten texts and calls from at least a dozen neighbors, all wanting to know about the courtyard loophole. The problem was, most homes in Meadowbrook community didn't have courtyards. The floor plan I'd chosen was one of only about 20 in the development with that feature. Everyone else had porches, balconies, or fully open backyards. Still, people were interested. And more importantly, people were getting angry. The next HOA meeting had actual attendance. Instead of the usual 5 or 6 people, nearly 40 homeowners showed up, cramming into the community center. I arrived early and took a seat in the front row. Brenda looked rattled when she saw the crowd. Patricia whispered something to her and Brenda nodded, her expression hardening. The meeting started with the usual formalities, minutes from the last meeting, financial reports. Then they got to new business. Before Brenda could speak, a woman I recognized from my street stood up. Her name was Jessica Romano, and she had 3 kids I often saw playing basketball in their driveway. "I want to talk about the heating equipment ban," she said, her voice shaking slightly but determined. "My family uses our porch every evening. It's the only time we can all be together without screens and distractions. With this ban, we're stuck inside all winter. This is Colorado. Winter is half the year." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Brenda held up her hand. "Mrs. Romano, the ban is for everyone's safety. We've had reports of fire hazards." "What reports?" someone called out. "I've lived here for 8 years and never heard of a single fire." Patricia shuffled through some papers. "We take a proactive approach to safety. We don't wait for disasters to happen." "So there haven't been any actual incidents," Jessica pressed. "The potential is what matters," Donald interjected, his face already reddening. "Do you want to wait until someone's house burns down?" I raised my hand. "I've researched fire statistics for outdoor heating equipment in Colorado. Properly maintained electric and propane heaters have an incident rate of less than 0.01%. You're more likely to have a fire from your indoor furnace." "Mr. Zander, you're not recognized to speak," Brenda said sharply. "This is a public meeting. Homeowners have the right to speak during the new business portion. It's in your own procedural rules." More murmurs, these ones approving. Sharon leaned over and whispered something to Brenda, who looked like she wanted to argue but thought better of it. "Fine. You have 2 minutes. I stood up, my folder in hand. "The heating equipment ban disproportionately affects families and working professionals who use their outdoor spaces for recreation and family time. The board has exempted their own properties through questionable interpretations of the rules. I've documented at least 4 board members using heating equipment that violates the spirit of the ban. This is selective enforcement at best and corruption at worst." The room erupted. People were shouting questions, demanding answers. Brenda banged her gavel, but it took several minutes to restore order. "Those accusations are baseless," Patricia said, her voice icy. "Our equipment is grandfathered or classified differently under the building codes. Building codes that you interpret however you want," I shot back. "Show me the documentation. Show everyone here the official classifications you're using." "We don't have to justify our decisions to you," Donald said, standing up now. "The board has authority under the bylaws. If you don't like it, you can leave the community." That was a mistake. Telling 40 angry homeowners they could just leave if they didn't like being told what to do on their own property. The meeting devolved into chaos. People were shouting, demanding recalls, threatening legal action. Brenda eventually adjourned the meeting early, citing unruly behavior. As everyone filed out, several neighbors approached me. "We need to do something," Marcus said. "This is out of control." "We need that petition," Jessica added. "The one you mentioned before. How many signatures do we need?" 92 to call for a special vote. "Let's do it." We formed an impromptu committee right there in the parking lot. Jessica, Marcus, and 3 other neighbors whose names I learned were Thomas, Linda, and Robert. We divided up the community streets and agreed to start canvassing the next day. This time, people were ready to sign. The brutal cold had everyone irritable and frustrated. The chaotic meeting had shown people that the board was dismissive and possibly corrupt. And my courtyard loophole had proven that the rules were arbitrary. In 3 days, we had 98 signatures. I submitted the petition through the HOA's online portal, with copies sent via certified mail and email to every board member. According to the bylaws, they had 30 days to schedule a special vote. They waited until day 29, scheduling it for a Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m., just like their regular meetings. I'd anticipated that. Our committee had too. We spread the word that people should take time off work, that this was important, that we needed maximum attendance. The day of the vote, over 150 homeowners showed up. The community center couldn't hold everyone. People spilled out into the hallway, some watching through windows. Brenda looked panicked. The vote was simple. Rescind the heating equipment ban, yes or no. But first, Brenda wanted to speak. "Before we proceed," she said, her voice echoing in the packed room, "I want to remind everyone that this board has served this community for years. We volunteer our time to maintain property values and ensure everyone's safety. This ban was not enacted lightly. We consulted with insurance advisors and safety experts." "Show us the consultation reports," someone called out. Brenda's jaw tightened. "Those are board documents, not public. The bylaws say financial and safety documents must be made available to homeowners upon request," I said, standing up. "I'm requesting them now." Patricia leaned into her microphone. "We'll make them available within the standard 10 business day period." "So after this vote, convenient." The moderator, a lawyer the board had hired, stepped in. "Let's proceed to the vote. All homeowners in attendance are eligible." Show of hands for rescinding the heating equipment ban. A forest of hands went up. I did a quick count, easily over 100. Opposed, maybe 10 hands, mostly board members and their friends. "The ban is rescinded," the moderator announced. The room erupted in cheers. Brenda sat frozen, her expression blank. Patricia was already gathering her papers, preparing to leave. Donald looked like he might have a stroke, his face purple with rage. But it wasn't over. As people started to leave, I approached the moderator, a middle-aged man named Carl Fletcher. "I have a follow-up petition," I said, handing him a document. "This one calls for a board recall election. I have the required signatures." His eyebrows went up. "You've been busy. People are tired of being bullied." He reviewed the petition, checking signatures against the homeowner registry. "This appears to be in order. I'll need to verify these, but if they check out, you'll have your recall election." Brenda overheard. She marched over, her heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. "This is a witch hunt," she said. "You're trying to punish us for doing our jobs." "You're being recalled for abusing your authority," I said calmly. "The homeowners will decide if that's fair or not." Over the next 2 weeks, the signatures were verified. All 92 checked out. The recall election was scheduled for the first Saturday in March. During those 2 weeks, things got ugly. Brenda started a counter-campaign, sending emails to every homeowner warning about the dangers of unqualified board members and the chaos that would result from removing experienced leadership. Patricia went door to door, trying to convince people that the current board was under attack by a small group of malcontents. Donald sent a letter claiming that the community's insurance rates would skyrocket if the heating equipment ban wasn't reinstated. It might have worked, except for one thing. A homeowner named Catherine Lewis, who'd lived in Meadowbrook for 15 years, decided to do some digging. Catherine was a retired paralegal with a lot of time and a suspicious mind. She requested all board financial documents for the past 3 years. According to the bylaws, she was entitled to them. The board stalled, claiming the documents were being compiled. Catherine filed a complaint with the county, citing Colorado's HOA transparency laws, that got the documents released. What she found was explosive. The board had been paying themselves consulting fees for the past 2 years. Brenda had received nearly $15,000. Patricia got $12,000. Donald and Sharon each got around $10,000. According to the bylaws, board members were supposed to be volunteers. Compensation was explicitly prohibited except for reimbursement of direct expenses. Catherine brought this to our committee, and we brought it to the homeowners. The reaction was immediate and furious. The recall election wasn't even close. All 4 board members were removed by margins of over 70%. New board members were elected from among the community. Jessica Romano became president. Marcus became treasurer. 3 other homeowners I'd gotten to know well, all people with families and full-time jobs, filled the remaining positions. I was asked to join, but I declined. I'd done what I needed to do. The new board's first action was to permanently rescind the heating equipment ban and establish clear guidelines for any future restrictions, including mandatory homeowner input periods and transparency requirements. Their second action was to refer the financial irregularities to a lawyer. That's when things got serious. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Diana Chen, reviewed the documents Catherine had found. She discovered that the consulting fees were just the beginning. The board had been billing the HOA for meals, travel, and even personal expenses, all disguised as community business. In total, they'd misappropriated over $60,000 in HOA funds. Diana reported it to the district attorney's office in Pine Ridge. 3 weeks later, Brenda, Patricia, Donald, and Sharon were all charged with theft and misconduct. I wasn't directly involved in the legal proceedings, but I followed them closely. The trial was set for June. In the meantime, spring arrived. The brutal cold lifted, temperatures climbed back to reasonable levels, and Meadowbrook community started to feel like a community again. People used their porches. Fire pits appeared in backyards. The sound of families laughing and enjoying the Colorado evenings filled the air. I still used my courtyard, but now I didn't have to. I could sit on my front porch if I wanted, heater running, waving to neighbors without worrying about fines or harassment. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. All 4 former board members were convicted. Brenda and Patricia, as the primary architects of the scheme, each got 18 months in county jail and were ordered to pay restitution. Donald and Sharon got lighter sentences, 6 months each, because they'd been more followers than leaders. All 4 were banned from serving on any HOA board in Colorado for 10 years. I attended the sentencing hearing. I wanted to see it through to the end. When Brenda was led out of the courtroom, she glanced my way. There was no anger in her expression anymore, just exhaustion and regret. I didn't feel victorious, just relieved. Afterward, I stood outside the courthouse with Marcus and Jessica. "Think we learned our lesson?" Marcus asked. "About paying attention to who runs our HOA?" "God, I hope so," Jessica said. "I never want to go through this again." We will, though, I said. Maybe not this exact situation, but something. HOAs attract people who want power and control. We just have to stay vigilant. Ugh, that sounds exhausting, Marcus groaned. It's part of homeownership, I said, the price of having a say in our community. We grabbed lunch at a diner in downtown Pine Ridge, talking about normal things for the first time in months. The Rockies game, summer vacation plans, a new restaurant opening on Main Street. It felt good to be past the drama. That evening I sat on my porch, my heater running even though it was warm enough that I didn't really need it. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Catherine Lewis. Thank you for standing up to them. A lot of us were too scared. You made it possible. I smiled and texted back. We all did it together, which was true. I'd started it, but the community had finished it. I thought about the past few months. The frustration, the anger, the endless meetings and paperwork and confrontations. It had been stressful and time-consuming and often felt futile. But sitting there, warm and comfortable on my own porch, knowing that my neighbors were doing the same, knowing that we'd taken back control of our community from people who'd abused it, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not the arrogant kind, but the quiet satisfaction of having done something difficult because it was right. My neighbor from across the street, an elderly woman named Margaret whom I'd only spoken to a handful of times, walked past with her small dog. She waved. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" she called out. "Sure is," I replied. "I'm glad we can enjoy our porches again. I missed my evening tea out here." "Me too, Margaret." She continued her walk and I returned to my book, but I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept wandering back through everything that had happened. The thing about HOAs is that they're supposed to protect property values and maintain community standards. In theory, that's great. In practice, they often become vehicles for petty tyrants to impose their will on everyone else. Brenda and her crew had forgotten that they were supposed to serve the homeowners, not rule over them. They'd gotten drunk on their little bit of power, and when people started pushing back, they doubled down instead of listening. The heating equipment ban had been the catalyst, but it wasn't really about heaters. It was about control. About a board that had stopped seeing homeowners as neighbors and started seeing them as subjects. And when you treat people like subjects, eventually they revolt. Over the next few weeks, life in Meadowbrook community settled into a new normal. The new board was responsive and transparent. They held meetings in the evening so working people could attend. They created an online forum where homeowners could discuss issues and vote on non-emergency matters. Property values, which Brenda had claimed would plummet without strict rule enforcement, actually increased slightly. Turns out people liked living in a community where they weren't constantly afraid of arbitrary fines and harassment. The restitution money from the criminal case was returned to the HOA's general fund. The new board used some of it to repair the community center, which had been neglected for years, and the rest went into reserves for actual emergencies. I started a tradition of hosting porch gatherings every Friday evening. Nothing fancy, just neighbors stopping by for beer and conversation. Sometimes 5 people showed up, sometimes 20. It didn't matter. It was about rebuilding the sense of community that had been damaged by years of adversarial board leadership. One Friday in early May, Marcus brought his fire pit over and set it up in my driveway. We roasted marshmallows and told stories while kids ran around the yard. Jessica arrived with her 3 children, who immediately joined the chaos. She grabbed a beer from the cooler and sat down beside me. "You know what's weird?" she said. "I'm actually enjoying living here now. Before, it always felt like I was waiting for the next violation notice or fine. Now it just feels like home. That's what it should have been all along, I said. Think Brenda and Patricia regret it. What they did. I thought about the expression on Brenda's face at sentencing. Probably. But I think they still believe they were right. That they were trying to protect the community, and we were the ones being unreasonable. That's the scariest part, Jessica said. They genuinely thought they were the good guys. Most people who abuse power do. Margaret joined us, bringing homemade cookies that disappeared within minutes among the kids. Thomas and Linda arrived with their teenage son. Even grumpy old Mr. Peterson showed up, though he left after one beer and a cookie, muttering something about noise. As the evening wore on and the fire burned low, people started drifting home. I stayed outside enjoying the quiet. My phone rang. It was my sister, Emily, calling from Seattle. "Hey, stranger," she said. "How's life in HOA hell?" I laughed. "Actually, it's pretty good now. We had a whole revolution. I'll tell you about it sometime." "A revolution? Over what? Porch heaters, believe it or not." "You're kidding." "Nope. It's a long story." We talked for a while, catching up on family news. After we hung up, I realized I was smiling. For the first time since moving to Meadowbrook, I felt genuinely settled. The summer passed peacefully. I got into a routine of working from my porch when the weather was nice, my laptop balanced on my knees, coffee within reach. Neighbors would wave or stop to chat. Kids played in the street. Dogs barked at squirrels, normal suburban life. In August, I got an email from a homeowner in a different community across town. They'd heard about what happened at Meadowbrook and wanted advice. Their HOA was trying to ban vegetable gardens, claiming they were unsightly. I spent an hour on the phone with her, walking through the process we'd used. How to organize, how to read the bylaws, how to build a coalition. "The key is documentation," I told her. "Keep records of everything, and don't make it personal, even when they make it personal with you. Stick to the facts and the rules." "Did you ever get scared? Like worried they'd retaliate somehow?" "Yeah," I admitted. "Brenda drove past my house multiple times a day. I got threatening letters. The fines kept piling up. But I knew I was right, and I knew the law was on my side, so I just kept pushing. And it worked. It worked. But it took months and a lot of effort. You have to decide if you're willing to commit to that." She was. 3 months later, she emailed to tell me they'd successfully blocked the garden ban and recalled 2 board members who'd been abusing their positions. I started getting more calls. Word spread somehow. The guy who fought his HOA over porch heaters and won. I helped where I could, but I was careful not to become some kind of anti-HOA crusader. HOAs aren't inherently evil. They serve a purpose. The problem is oversight and accountability. When board members can make rules without homeowner input, collect money without transparency, and enforce regulations without oversight, abuse is inevitable. The solution isn't to eliminate HOAs. It's to make them actually democratic. That fall, I was approached by a local news reporter who wanted to do a story about HOA reform. I agreed, figuring it might help other people in similar situations. The segment aired on a slow news night in October. It was only about 4 minutes, but it covered the basics. The heating ban, the financial corruption, the recall, the criminal charges. The reporter, a young woman named Ashley something, asked me what I'd learned from the experience. "That silence is complicity," I said. "If you see something wrong and don't speak up, you're part of the problem." And that sounds harsh, but it's true. Brenda and her board got away with their behavior for years because people were too busy or too scared to push back. Once we started fighting, we found out we weren't alone. We just needed someone to take the first step. The segment ended with footage of one of our Friday porch gatherings, kids playing, neighbors laughing, fire pits glowing. It was a nice piece. Positive, but not preaky. A few days later, I got a call from a law firm in Denver. They specialized in HOA law and wanted to know if I'd be interested in consulting on cases involving board overreach. I'm not a lawyer, I pointed out. No, but you understand the homeowner perspective. You know how to organize resistance. That's valuable. I thought about it. It would be a few hours a month, mostly reviewing cases and offering strategic advice. The pay was decent, I accepted. Over the next year, I worked on maybe a dozen cases. Most settled before going to trial. A few resulted in recalls. One ended with criminal charges similar to what happened with Brenda's board. It was satisfying work, helping people fight back against petty tyrants. But it was also depressing to see how common the problem was. In Meadowbrook, things continued to improve. The new board was boring in the best possible way. They fixed potholes, organized community events, and generally stayed out of people's business. Jessica stepped down as president after a year, saying she needed to focus on her family. Marcus took over and did a solid job. I continued to decline any official role, content to help from the sidelines when needed. My Friday porch gatherings became an institution. Even in winter, we'd bundle up, get the heaters running, and hang out. It was never the same people each week, but there was always a core group. Marcus and his wife, Jessica and her husband when they could get a babysitter, Thomas and Linda, Catherine, Margaret with her cookies. We'd become friends, real friends, not just neighbors who waved politely and complained about property values. That was the real victory, I realized. Not beating Brenda or changing the rules, but building actual community. 2 years after the whole mess started, I was sitting on my porch on a cold January morning, heater running, coffee steaming, when a car I didn't recognize pulled up. A woman got out. It took me a second to recognize her. Brenda, she looked different. Older, thinner, her hair now completely gray. She'd served her sentence and paid her restitution. I knew that from public records, but I hadn't seen her since the trial. She walked up my driveway slowly, hesitantly. I set down my coffee and stood up. "Stephen," she said. Her voice was quiet, lacking the sharp confidence I remembered. "Brenda, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm moving to Arizona next week to live with my daughter. I just wanted to say something before I left." I waited. "You were right," she said. "About everything. The ban was stupid. The way we ran the board was wrong. Taking that money was criminal. I know that now. I knew it then, really, but I convinced myself we deserved it for all the work we did. That's what prison gives you: time to think, time to see clearly." "Okay," I said, not sure what else to say. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did and I'm sorry, not just to you, to everyone in this community." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, this place looks better than it ever did when I was in charge. Happier. You did good." She walked back to her car and drove away. I sat back down, my coffee now lukewarm. I reheated it in the microwave and returned to my porch. The sun was rising over the Rockies, light spilling across the mountains in golden waves. Somewhere down the street, I heard kids laughing. A dog barked. Normal sounds of a normal morning. I thought about Brenda's apology. It didn't change what had happened, but it mattered somehow. Closure, maybe. My phone buzzed. Marcus, texting about the board meeting that evening. Something about new playground equipment. I texted back that I'd try to make it. Then I opened my book and settled in to enjoy my morning, warm and comfortable on my porch, heater running, exactly where I wanted to be. The heating equipment was never banned again. The HOA board remained transparent and accountable. Meadowbrook community continued to be, well, a community, and I learned something important through it all. Sometimes standing up to bullies means letting them make their rules while you find your own way to stay warm. Sometimes it means fighting back directly. Usually, it means both. But the most important thing is to never stop standing up. Because the moment you accept that someone else has the right to control your life for no good reason, you've already lost. I didn't let them make me freeze. I stayed perfectly warm, and in doing so, I showed everyone else that they didn't have to freeze either. That was enough. More than enough. I finished my coffee as the sun climbed higher, warming the morning air. Soon I wouldn't need the heater at all, but I left it running anyway, just because I could.